10 minutes of stretching before bed triggers a neurological shift that most sleep aids, supplements, and bedtime routines have never been able to produce, and it begins on the very first night. Don't forget to subscribe, comment, and share to others to benefit. Most people treat the hour before sleep the same way every night. Screen time, scrolling, a late conversation, or a final check of notifications. And then an attempt to transition a nervous system that has been stimulated right up until the moment the light goes off into the deep, restorative sleep the body desperately needs. That transition is harder than it should be for most people. And the reason is not willpower, not caffeine consumed too late, and not the mattress. It is the state of the autonomic nervous system at the moment sleep is being attempted, a system that governs the shift from the alert, activated state of waking life into the parasympathetic calm that sleep requires, and that most modern evening routines do absolutely nothing to support. Stretching before bed is not a flexibility practice at night. It is a nervous system intervention. And 30 days of doing it consistently produces changes in sleep quality, physical recovery, chronic tension, and morning physical readiness that accumulate in ways most people attribute to other variables, never connecting them to the 10 minutes of intentional stillness and movement they started doing before they closed their eyes. What stretching does to the nervous system at night. The human nervous system operates on a spectrum between two states. The sympathetic state, associated with alertness, cortisol, elevated heart rate, and the physiological profile of readiness for effort or threat. And the parasympathetic state, associated with rest, repair, lowered heart rate, and the internal conditions that support sleep onset and overnight recovery. The transition between these states does not happen automatically the moment someone decides it is time to sleep. It is a biological process that requires specific inputs to proceed efficiently, and the absence of those inputs is why so many people lie in bed awake, unable to quiet a nervous system that received no signal to downshift. Slow, sustained stretching, particularly of large muscle groups like the hip flexors, the posterior chain, and the muscles of the thoracic spine, activates the parasympathetic nervous system through a specific pathway. The sensory receptors in muscle and connective tissue that respond to sustained, gentle lengthening send signals to the central nervous system that are interpreted as safety, as the absence of threat, effort, or demand. Heart rate decreases. Breathing slows and deepens. Cortisol begins its evening decline. The body shifts toward the physiological state that sleep requires. This is not a relaxation effect in the vague, general sense. It is a measurable neurological transition that begins within minutes of initiating a sustained stretching practice and deepens across the duration of the session. People who stretch before bed consistently report falling asleep faster, not because they have addressed any structural limitation in their body, but because they have provided the nervous system with the parasympathetic activation signal it needed to complete the transition from waking to sleep readiness. What changes across 30 days? The neurological benefit of pre-sleep stretching is immediate. But the changes that accumulate across 30 consecutive nights of this practice extend significantly beyond faster sleep onset. In the first week, most people notice that the quality of the first hour of sleep, the period most critical for deep, slow-wave sleep and growth hormone release, improves noticeably. They wake feeling more rested from the same number of hours. The mechanism is the more complete parasympathetic activation achieved before sleep onset, which allows the sleep architecture of early night deep sleep to proceed with less neurological interference. By the second week, chronic physical tension that has accumulated across the day, in the neck, the shoulders, the hip flexors, the lower back, is being partially released each night rather than carried forward into the next morning at full intensity. The resting tension level in these chronically overactivated areas begins declining as a new baseline. Morning stiffness, The familiar resistance and discomfort that most people experience in the first minutes after waking reduces progressively because the overnight period is being entered with less accumulated muscular tension than before the practice began. By the third and fourth week, something happens that is harder to articulate but consistently reported: a change in the subjective experience of waking. People describe feeling more physically ready at the start of the day, less time spent in the groggy, stiff, reluctant state that typically separates waking from functional alertness. The overnight recovery has been more complete. The nervous system enters the morning from a more fully restored baseline, and the body, having spent the night in a deeper recovery state, has conducted more thorough tissue repair, more complete hormonal restoration, and more efficient metabolic reset than it managed before the stretching practice was introduced. The physical adaptation that continues building. Beyond the sleep and recovery benefits, 30 days of nightly stretching produces a genuine structural adaptation in the flexibility and range of motion of the areas being consistently worked, and this adaptation has its own compounding value. The hip flexors and anterior chain, among the most chronically tight areas in people who spend significant portions of the day seated, respond to 30 days of consistent end-of-day stretching with measurable increases in available range of motion. This improvement directly influences the quality of movement during training sessions, the mechanical efficiency of walking and running gait, and the postural alignment that governs how force is distributed across the spine and joints during every physical activity. Improved hip flexor length reduces the anterior pelvic tilt that excessive sitting produces, a postural deviation that increases compressive load on the lumbar spine, inhibits glute activation during training, and contributes to the lower back discomfort that affects a disproportionate share of the population. 30 days of targeted pre-sleep stretching of these structures begins correcting this deviation not through conscious postural effort, but through the structural restoration of the tissue's resting length. The thoracic spine, the region governing upper back extension and rotation, gains mobility that improves shoulder mechanics, reduces neck tension, and enhances breathing capacity. These are not isolated physical improvements. They cascade through every movement pattern that follows, making training more effective, daily movement more efficient, and the body's capacity for physical output more reliable. Conclusion: 30 days of stretching before bed does not require equipment, expertise, or a significant time investment. 10 minutes. On the floor, beside the bed, in whatever space is available. The same areas, worked consistently, with enough sustained duration in each position to give the nervous system time to respond. What those 30 days produce is not a flexibility achievement in the conventional sense. It is a fundamentally different evening routine, one that prepares the nervous system for genuine rest rather than forcing it to transition abruptly from stimulation to attempted sleep. It is a progressive reduction in the chronic physical tension that accumulates daily and, without intervention, simply compounds from one week to the next. And it is a measurably improved quality of overnight recovery that makes every other aspect of physical health and performance more effective. The investment is small. The compounding return is disproportionate to what most people expect from 10 minutes of quiet movement before sleep. Begin tonight. The first night will not feel transformative. The 14th will feel different enough to make the commitment permanent.